Oh, man, we have an awesome, absolutely fantastic backdrop right now. The broadcast, thank you, Saulo Rodriguez, has elevated the game. Now, here's the problem. With this fantastic setup here at Align Mortgage of Texas, we're very thankful to them, but with this fantastic setup, this means that our content, who we are, has to be that much better. So I can't promise that tonight, but I got two cool dudes with me. We're going to talk about constitutional carry this evening, but we are doing it at Align Mortgage of Texas, and we always start off with a big thank you to the hosts who let us come in here and film this. You can see it in the background. There's this giant digital broadcast behind us. It is a fantastic, oh, there it is. Salah goes with a wide shot so you can see the entire setup. This is a total game elevation. Big thank you to Chris Cano, Tony Diaz, and Cody Carrasquillo. They're the owners of Align Mortgage of Texas. And of course, to my main man, Saulo Rodriguez, who I think literally is doing two podcasts at the same time over there. Saulo? Yeah, he is. He's taking care of one and he's working the other. And I think he's eating Hooters wings at the same time. I'm not absolutely certain, but I know I ordered a bunch of buffalo wings. And Saulo is tearing it up. Saulo, you okay over there, bud? Thank you, man. It is good to be back. Saulo, we appreciate you. Love you. Align Mortgage, thank you. This is the #1 VA lender in the state of Texas, soon to be the nation. This team does VA loans and take care of veterans, first responders, you name it. They are a wonderful mortgage operation that's really rooted in faith and family first and foremost. So they just love taking care of people. You need a home mortgage. I got to tell you all the time, reach out, call the men and women of Align Mortgage. Ask them for whatever you need. Even if they can't help you with a home loan, they're just going to help you, period, to push you in the right place to make a decision that's best for you and your family. Thank you, Chris and team. We appreciate you. We appreciate this fantastic space, and we'll just get rocking and rolling on our topic. Tonight, we are back. And so the broadcast has been off for a little while. We popped on a couple of months ago. Well, I popped off a couple of months ago, and then about 1 month ago, we came on with a quick show to say we're going to be retooling. And now we're coming back and putting together our thoughts and ideas and trying to build a little bit better content. We're also going to get out there and start talking to people and really addressing the issues and the things that are happening in our city. Just because, and we all know from done things in politics, and things don't always go your way. You win some, you lose some, but you don't give up and you don't quit. You keep coming back and talking about the things that matter in our city, in our state, in the county, you name it. We'll be bringing on, hopefully, elected officials like Trish DeBerry, Tony Gonzalez, and other people to talk about what's happening in our community and how each one of you can do your little part to make San Antonio that much better. That's what we're going to do about the broadcast. That's what's going to be about, information plus holding City Hall accountable and telling the story of what, if anything I've learned in politics over the last 10 years in San Antonio is that the media is feeding you about 1/10 of the truth. The other 90% is usually garbage they make up to support the issue or their ratings or a particular candidate. So think about that when you're out there watching all these news and other items and stories, and whether they're ragging on police officers, they're talking bad about firefighters, they're not talking about the crime rate, they're not talking about your taxes getting spent. Whatever the issue is, get involved, learn it, figure it out, and we're going to help you by bringing tons of data and information over the next several months so you can make good decisions. Tonight, though, we got a great one. So we're going to talk this evening with two gentlemen about constitutional carry. So what happened in the state of Texas is Texas caught up with, I think, about 15 or 20 other states, where now we have permitless carry that was voted into law, signed by the governor, in effect, I think, right around September 1st. We're going to dig into that a little bit. We're going to ask some questions and figure out how that works. The beauty of it is I'm a novice on the topic. So the questions and things we learn tonight, what we talk about, are going to set us up and help us all understand what the law really is, because there's a lot of bullshit flying around. There's a lot of people out there talking a lot of fear factor, and a lot of people just talking uninformed. So tonight we have two gentlemen with us. First and foremost, the teacher tonight is Mr. Eric. He's a Texas law enforcement officer. We'll leave it at that to protect the innocent. He's been in the job for 20 years. Eric is a law enforcement professional and an expert on constitutional carry and all things self-defense and gun ownership and education and training and license to carry, you name it. Eric's going to walk us through everything tonight. And then, of course, all things armory and expert in selling and just blasting things. I love him. Mike Mahalski, a continual friend of the broadcast as well as the city, man, is always out there doing great things with Sons of Liberty Gun Works. Mike, thank you for being here as well to give your perspective on the situation. So before we hop into it, man, talk to me, Eric, give them a little bit about what you do and what you're trying to accomplish with helping people understand these laws with guns and stuff, because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
Oh, absolutely. While I'm a police officer professionally, I also am a licensed to carry instructor and a firearms instructor. And that's kind of a passion for me. So that's something I do outside of my law enforcement job. But being in law enforcement, we're exposed to seeing a lot of things where people have guns, use guns, don't use guns, and just kind of how they play real life into our everyday society. Right now we're hearing about constitutional carry because it's the hot button topic that as the legislature just closed up. And so there's like you just said, there's a lot of people throwing a lot of information out there, not all of it entirely accurate. So our goal as firearms instructors is to get accurate information into the hands of the people who own guns, carry guns, use guns for self-defense potentially, and maybe push down some of those fears that they're not really founded in fact, and make people aware of what their options are, how to stay out of jail, how to use that firearm in a legal way should you have to. I mean, those are the goals that we're pursuing.
Well, perfect. I appreciate you. Eric tonight has got a small little presentation. He's going to go over the facts of constitutional carry, because before we ever go out into the world and think we're going to have all the answers, we should at least know what the truth is and what the law absolutely states. Mike, you said something right before we came on that there are 20 million new gun owners in the country. So what's some of the things that you would tell people who are entering into gun ownership? Look, you're an expert in it. You manufacture some of the best weaponry for this. I mean, everything from special forces to the smallest local law enforcement departments. You're taking care of everybody across the world now. That's how big Sons of Liberty has gotten. So what are some of the things for that novice, that first-time person, 20 million new gun owners, anything you're excited about or you want to warn people about going forward in the future?
No, I mean, we encourage people to develop some kind of proficiency with the firearm. I mean, just because you're no longer required to sit through a course to get a license does not mean that you should not pursue on your own some type of training to learn the law. I mean to learn when a shoot, no shoot kind of scenario is, how to articulate, your statement, if you will. I think, some of the CHL or some of the permits out there, they still allow for reciprocity. So to say that need for a permit has gone completely away, I would say is not correct. And I would say that the need for proficiency is probably more important than ever. I'm glad that we got constitutional carry passed in Texas. I think that's one of the holy grails that we've been after for a long time, right? And there's kind of an interesting backstory how we got there. But no, I would tell people to go out and pursue training, learn what you're doing, have respect for that firearm. There's no small mistakes with the gun, that you cannot take that bullet back. So, know what you're doing. But congratulations, Texas, for finally catching up to the other half of the country that he's talking about bad information that's out there. People are like, oh my God, this is such a novel, crazy idea. No, a lot of states have had this in place for a long time with no massive societal collapse.
Hey, Sala, can you put up number 7? That map, the blue map, since Mike mentioned it right there. What's interesting, right? What states in this United States allows the permitless carry of guns? And this is as of 2021. So none, right there. You'll see the states that are now about a dozen. Concealed carry, and then open and concealed carry, and then open carry prohibited in the gray, concealed carry with a permit. So you'll notice there's a variance across the entire country about who's doing what. But what we do see is constitutional carry on the rise, and this permitless carry making sense. So you got Montana, Idaho, you got Arizona, Texas now, Oklahoma, Missouri, Iowa, good old Alabama. So they're constitutional carry. So these numbers are growing. Man, even Maine, right? Look, man, there are some crazy East Coast states out there.
Interesting factoid. So Vermont, which is Bernie Sanders stomping grounds, has never required a permit of any kind to carry ever. They still don't. But I mean, just to throw it out there for perspective, this is not a novel idea.
I didn't even notice that Vermont, Bernie Sanders' backyard. Yeah. Mike brings up that point, has never required a permit to carry a weapon in the history of the state.
Yeah, I mean, they were.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It looks like it's Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine who are pretty much highly liberal East Coast states, and they have permitless carry, constitutional carry as well. So those are some facts. Let's throw out some things. So what I hear about from people is there's this conversation across the city, and Sala, we'll start with number 1. and we'll just kind of work our way down on the slide. So crime happens in our city, right? So people want to make sure that they're protected and they're safe. And there are always things we want to talk about when it comes to crime, but I want to be clear that there's two sides to it. Some people just feel safe because it's San Antonio, and they're in their little part of the city and they never get messed with. There's no property crimes. Nobody ever rolls up in any type of gang activity. They don't see things in their community. But that's not how a lot of San Antonio lives. So if you pull up number one, some interesting facts I want to make sure I got out about what's happening in the city. Number one, San Antonio has seen a rise in its homicides. It's on track for one of the deadliest years in decades. It's 81 murders through, I believe the story was yesterday, 81 murders. And that would be a record over the last 35 to 40 years if it continues on that pace. Can you go to number two? So San Antonio, I found this neighborhood scout out there when it comes to a crime index. You're always trying to find, it's tough to gauge crime and how police, and what kind of police officer head count you need. SAPD will always dispute, and as well as City Hall, whether or not they're fully staffed. There's about 2,450 police officers at any one time. Now, those are sworn officers. How many of them are actually on the street? We don't know that number, because out of those 2,450, there are varying levels of activity, whether they're doing different jobs, whether they're downtown in admin. There are about 2,450 sworn officers. And I tell you, I always use this as a frame of reference. Dallas, 4 hours north, has 200,000 fewer residents and 500 more police officers. So you really got to think about the metrics and why crime, conversation, constitutional carry. People are worried about, oh man, if my kid rolls out and decides to go graffiti someone's house, now he's going to get killed by some yahoo without a permit. So these are some of the things you're hearing about. Can you go to number two? Back to that neighborhood scout thing. So San Antonio is safer than 4% of the top 100 U.S. cities. I mean, these are facts based on crime reports. Go to number three. Violent crime comparison per residence. If you take a look at that one as well, this is just looking at the average. So San Antonio per 1,000 residents is at a 7.15 average on a violent crime. The national average is a 4. Texas says at 4.19, so San Antonio is seeing a drastic increase in violent crimes. And this has been reported somewhat on the news, but they don't talk about these things. What's dominating our news, obviously, is COVID and all these other issues, so we're not really getting any of that. But what's interesting is we're seeing these increases in crime. We're seeing these opportunities to say, hey, we got to do things different in policing. We just got off a big election cycle where we had to vote on whether or not to revoke police officer contracts and their funding. Now, it barely failed, but we almost defunded our police department. Go to number 5 real quick right there, Salo, and take a look at this question. Give one ahead of me, man. Go to number 4, my bad. So these questions are popping up. Do you think local police have enough resources to keep you and your family safe? Now go to number 5. And the citizens, and this least from these non-scientific polls, 88% say yes. I got a hard time believing that. When you read the comments, it's something completely different. But so people have a different perspective of what they're seeing from their little personal side of the world. I'll tell you what, the people with internet access that have time to answer these polls are probably not the areas that are experiencing a lot of crime. The South Side and other areas of town where there's a lack of internet access and all these other things, where the crime is happening, we have to remember that and try to flex our resources into that piece. So do you think about anything when you see those crime stats? Or?
Well, if you looked at the stats for the level of satisfaction that citizens had with the SAPD when they were doing the polling during the Fix SAPD campaign that thankfully got beat, the level of satisfaction with San Antonio Police Department from the citizens was about 80-something% of people that were satisfied with our police department. Now, I wonder if that poll, where they're asking if you feel if the department has enough resources, I wonder if that's confused as, do you feel like you have confidence in your police department? Because like whether or not they have enough resources is a totally different question. And perhaps they need to be a little bit more nuanced on how they answer that question. I mean, I would like to see if it was posed a different way. If you were to ask the citizens, do you think San Antonio is understaffed as a police department? I bet you the polling data would look a little bit different. It's all on how you ask the question, right?
Right. So from a law enforcement perspective, Eric, how do you feel about it when you're out there? Are you noticing anything different from a crime perspective, or the level of support? I always have thought over the years in San Antonio and just in surrounding areas and small cities that the police officers are roundly respected across most of the community. I've thought that when I was on council, and generally speaking, San Antonio loves their law enforcement. officers, but
and I'm not speaking specifically to San Antonio, but I think South Texas in general, maybe all of Texas in general, is a relatively pro-police state compared to some of the other states that we're watching on the news on a daily basis with different events that are going on. I also think that some of the stats that we look at, if you back out and look around the whole state or maybe around the whole country, you'll see are pretty consistent. It's not just one city that's seeing an increase in crime or violent crime or murders. And that's happening at a lot of cities around the country. And people can argue what the reasoning is for those stats going up the way they have. Common sense kind of dictates that many people know why they're going up the way they have. But the fact of the matter is violent crime is probably on the uptick, not just in San Antonio, not just in South Texas, but quite a few metropolitan areas around the country.
yeah, I always like to talk about our friends up in Portland.
I was just there.
Between Portland and Minneapolis, right? Portland has an 800% increase
That's nuts.
in crime right now. Austin has seen a serious uptick in crime when they turned around and defunded about $125 million from their police department. How are you seeing when you're traveling the country, Mike, and you're talking to people and you're providing obviously weapons and protective equipment for police officers? What are you hearing as you travel and see?
Well, I was just in Seattle. I was just
Chaz.
there. Yeah, and I went to the.
You went to Chaz.
I did. So first of all, I was really surprised at how densely populated that area. It wasn't some empty field. You're talking about a densely populated area of businesses and residences in that area. So they didn't just take over like some empty park. This was a lived-in, dense area. Okay, which was the police department. The precinct there is still abandoned. It is still chained up. It is still gone. So things have not gone back to normal. You do see, across the country, almost every agency we work with, from talking to the guys, there is a reduction in proactive policing, and it has a lot to do with heavy-handed policies coming down on how some of that stuff is done, and also the lack of confidence that individual officers have in like the city. Maybe that's not the case in San Antonio, but I'm telling you, proactive policing across the country is down.
From the city leadership supporting police officers.
Right, and then of course, there's a political side to even high enough up in a police department.
The higher you go up, the more politicized, obviously, your position is. That's like that in any business. It's no different for the police department.
Sure.
The chief of police in San Antonio, Bill McManus, is really the only member he's the only person not a member of the police union. Reports directly to, I think there may be one other person. There's like 2,400. They all join the union. You don't have to join the union when you're a police officer, but almost all do. But the chief of police is not one of them, and he reports directly to the city manager. So there's a different chain of command, and there's always a bit of a button heads between city leadership, the chief of police who's trying to satisfy the needs and his men and women and the equipment and protecting them, while also at the same time answering to the political side. And I've sat in a room where the chief of police's position gets very politicized, and it's almost like an elected official's pushing him or her, the chief of police, to do something to satisfy a personal political agenda. Yeah. I've seen it. And it makes for a very difficult time when you then have to turn around and go out and talk to a law enforcement official or one of your men and women who work for you in the department and then say, hey, I need you to do this now. And as you change the rules of engagement, that's always a bad thing. I would imagine if the rules of engagement are ambiguous for law enforcement.
And what's important in law enforcement right now, and what I don't feel we hear enough of, is that there's nobody that wants bad cops out of the law enforcement profession than good cops. Good cops do not want bad cops sullying their name or the name of their department. So I think it's very important, the higher you go in the ranks in a police department, that there is nothing wrong with addressing officers who are not doing it correctly. However you address that is going to be scaled to whatever the event was. But it's equally important that your officers know that when you do it right, you have their back. Hey, if we mess up, our chief is going to hold us accountable, but if we do it right, he's going to have our back, and we don't hear enough of that part. And there are plenty of chiefs that do back up their officers, and sheriffs out there that do back up their officers. They don't get that press because there's no story there. But I talk to law enforcement leaders pretty regularly, and that's one of the things that I feel is really important, that as you move into those leadership ranks, you understand, hey, there's nothing wrong with holding these guys accountable if they do something that's questionable or maybe shouldn't have been done. at the same time, they need to know that when they go out there, as long as I'm doing it right and I'm doing things ethically and morally grounded, that they will have my back. And I think these departments where you're really seeing the proactive policing fall off is because they feel like no matter what they do, they're going to be raked over the coals.
Yeah, well, and you got to also factor in like bail reform, right? So even whenever a police officer does arrest somebody and you know, puts them in jail, like they're out, you know, relatively quick. Whenever before, you know, it had been a little bit harder to get out of that position, right? So the longer you're sitting in jail, the less crime you're able to commit on the streets, right? So that means some bail reform has contributed to the rise in this, and just the overflow of this. This is a true story. I'm not going to name names, but a buddy of mine who's on a special unit here in Texas, they ended a pursuit 2 nights ago with spike strips. They end a pursuit. They spiked the car, recovered weapons, recovered a lot of drugs. They hooked those dudes up and they took them to jail where they could not receive them, and those dudes were cut loose for weapons, drugs, and a pursuit that ended with spike strips. And there's nowhere to stick them. I mean, so I mean, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of things contributing to that. Those guys are back out on the street, you know.
Yeah,
the media's not covering.
Well, there's been, yeah, the media, and the media doesn't cover, and that's again that we get is like 1/10 of the truth, right? Yeah. There's a little truth sprinkled in everything, and you have to do the hard research to figure out what's really happening, right? If you don't educate yourself, you're going to fall right into this little mix, especially when it comes to things like constitutional carry and educating yourself on responsible gun ownership. You're going to fall right into that mix of this misinformation, and then you live in this world where every decision you make after that, it's like I was on Facebook the other day, and I saw somebody post a picture of some of the soccer women, the U.S. women's soccer team. Half of them are looking this way, half of them are looking forward, and a 99-year-old World War II veteran is playing the harmonica. And then all these comments were down with the U.S. women's soccer team, kick them out of America, these people need to go, right? And then some people are asking, well, hold on a second, what's really happening here? And then I see these other feeds where it's saying, no, half the women were facing the flag, they didn't know to look forward. And then the U.S. women's leadership team is saying, hey, hold on a second here. They meant to look this way because they thought that's where the flag was. They just got into this whole shitstorm. And it was almost like they were going to go knock on Megan Rapinoe's door and kick her back, send her to Cuba or something, man. I mean, not that some people don't deserve to get, told about America, but it turned into this entire mess over one photo. Like the photo just told one story. Right. And don't get me wrong, if I see a 99-year-old man playing the harmonica as a World War II vet, I'm looking at him. Like, I'm looking wherever he's looking because there's a respect factor there. But it just gets out of control. So the misinformation on the media is what's important. And tonight, what we wanted to take was a few minutes and talk about constitutional carry, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not as well versed on it. Obviously, I see these things happening in Austin. Now we have a special session coming in the next few weeks here where we're going to talk about different things that didn't get passed during the regular session. A lot of that around voting rights and voting restrictions, according to Democrats. And Republicans see this as making sure we have legal and authorized voting across the state. The Democrats are screaming this on one thing. All these things are going to start lining up, including transgender issues in sports. All these things the Texas State Legislature is going to address in the special session. There's 11 items on that. So rules and laws are coming. And everything that just happened out of the biennial legislative session in Austin goes into effect September 1. So constitutional carry is one of those. We're going to let Eric and those slides, Salo, take over from here. But real quick up front, Reality Defense Incorporated, that's the name of the organization. Reality Defense Inc. You can find them they're tagged on the podcast, they're tagged on the page. I think if you just put in there at Reality Defense Inc., you will bring up the organization. They do training, they educate, they teach families, children, you name it. They talk to you about what it means to be a responsible gun owner. They did license to carry in the past. They've done every bit of training, and they don't just train civilians too. I've been watching them on the page over the years. They're out there training other law enforcement officials from across the state, across the nation, and they're a wealth of knowledge. So we've asked them tonight to kind of give us a 10 to 15 minute what is constitutional carry, and to go through their little presentation.
I was going to say, for RDI, RDI is a partner of Sons of Liberty Gunworks, and this is where we as a company use their facility, where we host a lot of our training stuff. I mean, it's an amazing facility with really, really good staff. So, I mean, anybody if you're in this area and you're looking for good training, I'm proud to partner with these guys.
And RDI's in
Pleasanton,
Texas. And you can find them. You have a website too, right?
Yeah, realitydefense.net's the website. You can find us on Facebook. You'll see a lot of the activities we're doing on the Facebook page. That's pretty active. You mentioned as we introed into this that I was an expert, and honestly, I feel like I'm a lifelong learner because I see classes that other people are teaching all the time that I want to go to because I want to know more about. And constitutional carry right now is so new. I don't know if we have any experts yet because we're all sifting through those laws and finding out what actually passed and how are we going to implement this and what's it going to look like for Texans. Over the years we heard it when it used to be the CHL before it became the LTC, the concealed handgun license. When that passed back in the 90s, it was like, there's going to be blood in the streets. It's going to be like Wyatt Earp. Of course, that didn't come to pass. We passed open carry, I think in 2016 or somewhere around there, 2017. And when that passed, it was the same exact arguments. There's going to be shootouts on every corner. We're not going to be able to walk down our street safely. That didn't happen. And you're hearing some of those same things with constitutional carry. What I hear most are people saying things that are just factually incorrect. And I don't think that many of them are doing it with malicious intent. They just don't know, and maybe they're a little bit afraid or somebody told them something that's incorrect and they're just regurgitating that. So hopefully we can clear up a little bit of that tonight. We're going to continue to learn more about it as it gets implemented. Like you said, it gets implemented September 1st. And so don't think that you can carry right now without a license. You still need your LTC. And LTCs, by the way, they're not going away. At RDI, we teach the LTC course. We will continue to teach it. There are some benefits to having a license to carry. It's recognized in 35 states in the country. It speeds up purchasing a firearm from an FFL. When you deal with law enforcement, there's many law enforcement officers that when they are dealing with somebody with an LTC, it kind of dials down the tension a little bit because they know this guy's already had a background check. He's obviously not a criminal or he wouldn't have this. So there's a few other benefits to having one. That's not to say that you have to have one, but they're still going to be out there and people are still going to get them. So the LTC program is not going away. First and foremost, clear that up because some people thought this meant now they can't get an LTC, and you absolutely can still get an LTC, and you still will be able to after September 1st.
Salo, you want to start on the slides and let him roll through some of these points if you can remember what the slides are. Here we go. We got this.
So we threw what we felt were the high points of what constitutional carry is going to look like, and we're going to learn more as we get past September 1st. But what it does is, if you can legally own a gun, if you can legally walk in right now today and buy a handgun, as of September 1st, you will legally be allowed to carry that handgun. It doesn't change the fact that people who are felons or people who are convicted of domestic violence offenses or any of the other categories that would prohibit you from purchasing a firearm or carrying one now, those are not going to change.
So if you're prohibited in any one of those instances, constitutional carry does not mean you can go out and carry.
Correct. If you were prohibited today from obtaining a firearm or possessing a firearm, September 1st, those prohibitions don't magically disappear. A felon still will not be able to carry a firearm after September 1st. So that was one of the biggest ones we've heard, is that absolutely anybody and their brother can just now, put on a gun and walk around with it. Gang members, people on parole, people who've committed crimes, they can just put on a gun and carry it. It's legal. That is incorrect. If you are prohibited from carrying a gun today, if you have tried to get an LTC but you broke some law and you committed a felony or were convicted of a felony and that kept you from getting your LTC, you're still not going to be able to carry one after September 1st. So that should put a few people's mind at ease because that's not accurate information. Obviously, like I just mentioned, the LTC is going to remain as an option. The two biggest points there that people have mentioned so far is the reciprocity. Hey, I travel for work. The states I go to recognize Texas LTC, so I want to keep that, or I want to get one. And then, hey, I'm a firearms enthusiast. I buy firearms from time to time, and when I go into the store and I have my LTC, boom, that purchase just happens quick. So those are the two biggest reasons right now that we're hearing from some of the people that we work with and train with that is going to be the driving force behind people continuing to get their LTC.
Okay, next slide, Salo. There you go.
So,
we already went through some of these.
Yeah, we went through some of these. It does not affect the purchase of a firearm. If you can't purchase one now, you won't be able to purchase one post September 1. It doesn't change who can possess them. It doesn't abolish the LTC program. It doesn't change the places an individual is prohibited from carrying a firearm. So if you currently have an LTC and you know where you can and can't carry, hey, I can't carry into a 51% establishment, those establishments that make 51% of their money off of alcohol, you're still not going to be able to carry in there. Now, there's going to be some new signage that's going to come out September 1 that businesses will be able to post. But if you can't carry into your school or any of the other places, a polling place on election day, things like that, you're still not going to be able to carry there just because constitutional carry comes into effect.
I'm sorry, I can imagine somebody carrying going into the polling place.
Yeah, well, you'd be
I'm here to
surprised.
make sure my vote's going to count. Because some of them aren't, I'm telling you right now.
That's a whole different
That's
show.
a whole other subject. But back in the last one, too, the previous slide, it did say at the bottom, too, that was interesting, is it on-campus carry, too?
Yeah, so
there's no permitless campus carry either.
Well, the places that you could carry before with your LTC, you'll be able to carry. You'll be able to carry without an LTC, but there are still portions of college campuses that you won't be able to carry. We are actually going to offer a class on constitutional carry for people, even though, like Mike said, there's no requirement that you take a class to be able to carry a gun after September 1st. But it would behoove you to know what the law is, just to keep yourself out of trouble and out of jail.
What's the next slide for him here? These are good points.
So law enforcement officers, if you encounter a law enforcement officer who's pulled you over on a traffic stop, or maybe there's some kind of dispute or disturbance out on the street, for whatever reason, he's come up to talk to you, a law enforcement officer can disarm you during the course of that encounter. Now, if we perform a traffic stop or we are breaking up an argument and we've decided to disarm that person while we talk to them and we find out, hey, no law has been broken, nobody's going to jail tonight, this was a misunderstanding, the officer will give them back their gun, let them go on their way. But if an officer, for whatever reason, feels like it would be safer for you to be disarmed while we talk today, then they do have that right. So we don't want people to get hemmed up because there's a cop talking to him and he decides, hey, you know what, let's put that gun over here on the seat of my car for a minute while I talk to you, just so we can relax a little bit. They do have that authority under the new law. One of the several of the things that changed.
Some of these places you wouldn't even know about.
Yeah, so there was actually 7 pro Second Amendment bills that were signed into law by the governor after this legislative session. The constitutional carry was only one of them, but one of the other ones was the holster law. You used to have to carry in a belt holster or shoulder holster. There's now a new law that does not do away with holsters entirely, but it just lets you choose what kind of holster. If you want to wear it on your ankle or you want to wear it in some other fashion, you're no longer restricted just to belt and shoulder anymore. So that's going to go into effect.
As long as it's holstered anywhere on your...
Correct.
Okay.
Just putting your gun in your sock and walking around like that is not going to be legal. You do have to have it in some type of...
recommended for that.
Yeah, but
It's a little bit, I don't know if I put it in my sock.
It's just not smart.
It's not smart.
Yeah.
So what else we got? So places you cannot carry. You mentioned some of
places
them.
you still can't carry. Polling places, when voting is taking place, government meetings open to the public. If they post that they don't want you to carry there, you can't.
As much as you want to show up to, to a city council meeting, you can't.
Well,
don't.
Courthouses. There are some exceptions for people that can carry in there, but by and large, most people can't. Any place where a high school, college, or pro sporting event is taking place, racetracks, correctional facilities, the controlled access part of an airport. So basically anything past security at the airport. No guns, regardless of.
You want to elevate your arrest status.
Yeah,
quickly go into an airport terminal that's controlled with a weapon. I think that'll get you.
They pay attention to that stuff.
That'll get you lit up quick.
Amusement parks. If you go to Six Flags, if you go to Disney World's not in Texas, but if you go to Six Flags or any of the amusement parks in Texas here, constitutional carry.
So none of these rules are not a drastic rule change here where you can or cannot carry. What's the next slide, Salo? Let's help them get through. Let's see here. And penalties. Here's where I was interested in.
Yes.
Penalties.
So as the House and the Senate worked through these 2 bills, there was 2 bills. There was Bill 1911 and 1927, they had the same intent. The House and the Senate got together to hash out what everybody was agreeable to. One of those caveats that came up and ended up becoming law was that unlawful carrying by felons gets bumped from a third-degree felony to a second-degree felony. So the maximum penalty goes from 10 years in prison to 20 years in prison. And the message they're trying to send there is, I know people think that constitutional carry means everybody can carry. It doesn't apply to felons. If you are a felon, do not carry, because not only is it's still illegal, but now the penalty is potentially twice as much as it was.
So it doubles the punishment if you're a felon.
If you're a felon
unlawfully
in possession of a firearm.
A felon in possession of a firearm goes from 10 years to 20 years.
That would be the maximum.
Maximum
is going to go from 10 to 20 on September 1st.
That's not been in the news at all. Like they're quick to talk about all the other stuff, but the fact that they have enhanced the penalties, and then on the second one it was
domestic
violence situation. So if you're carrying, that means you would have been told you will not carry, right?
Right. So you can be convicted. There are a few crimes that are not felonies in Texas that might be a Class A misdemeanor for a family. Domestic violence charge, for instance, if you're convicted of that penalty has also been enhanced now.
From a misdemeanor to a...
Well, if you're carrying, having been convicted.
Correction.
Also, I think terroristic threats is one of them.
Yeah, so if you are convicted of domestic violence, you are not able to carry a firearm. As of September 1st, that penalty will be enhanced.
Felony, right?
Because they're trying to deter people that think, I don't need a license so I can carry. No, if you couldn't, like we said, if you couldn't carry before, you can't carry now. And if you think you can, it's going to hurt a little more if you get convicted.
So key points to remember on that, because we want to make sure we're very clear on that. The laws that were signed in also come with greater penalties for those who continue or think, this is now open season for me, right? So the domestic violence one is very important. Obviously, we're talking about San Antonio and Bexar County, our domestic violence numbers, we understand that. Mm-hmm. It's talked about frequently and has been for several years now. So that's now from a misdemeanor to a felony.
Correct.
And then it's ratcheted up. A felon who's in unlawful possession of a firearm goes to a second-degree felony.
From a third to a second.
Right, so now and it almost doubles the possible jail time that you're looking at with carrying. Okay, those are good points. What's next, Salo?
So you're going to have a choice, and that's what we talked about a little bit earlier, that people thought the LTC was going to go away. We've been asked that countless times. The LTC program is not going away. We've mentioned some of these bullet points up here. Expedited purchases if you're buying a firearm, valid in 35 other states. Versus constitutional carry, it does not require a course or training, so you can start carrying September 1st if you're legally able to do so. But you are still responsible for knowing what Texas laws are regarding carrying a firearm. So, we still encourage people. I say, even as an LTC instructor, I have no problem with constitutional carry because I always say it's better to err on the side of freedom. But just because you can do something doesn't mean it's always the smartest thing to do. So maybe I can carry without any training whatsoever, but that's not the smartest thing to always do. So we still encourage people to go out, obtain some level of knowledge about what the law is, if for nothing else, just to keep yourself out of trouble by inadvertently going somewhere you shouldn't carry, or one of the other laws that you could break, and not intentionally, but find yourself at the wrong end of the law.
What is there another slide, Salo, or is that the end of it? Okay, RDI.
There's some contact information for RDI.
RDI right there. So, Salo, let's bring us back on here. So RDI is always available, and again, in Pleasanton, Texas, you can follow them on the Facebook page. You can reach out for any level of training. Walk us through, and both of you, just some rules of engagement, right? That somebody may not know. So I don't know, you think, Governor Abbott, it's my guy, he signs this into law. I'm showing up at Academy tomorrow and I'm gonna buy me the cheapest handgun, like whatever your story is, right? And you've never done anything with it. There are laws that govern your interaction and when you choose to discharge that weapon or to bring it out in public in any way, shape, or form, whether it's self-defense or you're defending your personal property, or walk us through some of the things that people need to be. You say, well, you got to know how to use the weapon, right? You got to know when and how and what the rules, the laws are that protect you or hold you accountable for, frankly, misusing the weapon. So what are some of the top items that you would say immediately people, once you purchase that, you're on the spot responsible for when you carry that thing out of the store?
So I just wrote an article for a gun magazine that just came out last month, and one of the things that I said in that just sticks with me all the time is simply purchasing a firearm does not make you ready for a deadly force encounter. And the analogy I use is I can go out and buy the same golf clubs Tiger Woods has, but that does not mean I'm ready to play Tiger Woods. I can go out and you can go out and buy the same gun that the San Antonio SWAT team carries. That does not mean you're ready to be on the San Antonio SWAT team. So what we need to do is take the equipment, which is the hardware, and then our brain is the software, and hopefully get some data in here that helps us make good decisions should the time come where we have to present that weapon or use that weapon to defend ourselves or our family. One of the things at RDI that we really focus on is not training people to be high-speed Navy SEAL type people. We want the average person who goes to work every day, who's raising his kids, who's going to Little League, who's doing all the things that normal America does, and feel confident that should something bad happen, I have a reasonable confidence in my skills to address that situation, to get my family to a place of safety. So we have beginner handgun courses pretty regularly at RDI, and one of the things we see consistently is that person that went to academy, bought the gun on the way to the class, they've never even taken it out of the box, but they may be legally able to carry, but they don't know how to load the gun, or they don't know how it functions. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing that. What's wrong in my eyes is if you don't know how to use this and you feel like you're still going to go out there and carry or feel like you're somehow making yourself or your family safer. The fact that you want to carry, that's great. We want you to be able to do that. We just want you to have some basic skills that allow you to do it safely, legally, and keep yourself safe and the rest of us safe that are interacting in society with you.
Yeah, so you get pulled over on a traffic stop, and so what's the recommendation? You're a law enforcement, you're a police officer, so you have to declare?
So the law, like right now, everybody that we encounter that is carrying.
Are police officers in the least bit worried about this, or do you think it's more of an awareness thing now?
Yeah, so one of the things that I hear, especially when I talk to police officers from out of state, is they're like, oh man, you work in Texas, like everybody carries a gun there, like what do you guys do? You stop a car, what do you do? The guy's got a gun, like what do you do? And my answer is always the same, like, well, if they don't pull theirs out and I don't pull mine out, and usually it ends okay, and that's really the truth. I think when we encounter people now that have a license to carry, those are the people that are legally carrying, that are following the law. Those are not the people that police are typically worried about. They are the people that show you their LTC with their driver's license and tell you, hey, I've got a LTC, I've got a gun in the console, I've got a gun on my hip. Typically, those aren't the people that the police officers that I deal with daily are the most concerned about. We're typically concerned with the guy that's carrying a gun that probably shouldn't be carrying one because he's a gang member or he's a felon or he's got some other nefarious plans for somebody. So just police encountering somebody with a firearm, it's not probably as stressful as some make it out to be. There are, Texas is so vast and so different we have very small rural towns, county sheriff's departments, and then, cities like Houston and San Antonio and Dallas and Austin that are very urban.
Yeah, very urban.
So it's going to vary how those officers feel.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another thing too. Like, how do officers feel? Like, the rank and file guys, the dudes that are out there, or like the dudes in the political or leadership positions that are appointed. So in your bigger metropolitan areas, you had the leadership of some of these agencies that voiced a lot of opposition to it. Okay, that was not, I don't think, shared by like the rank and file guys. But I mean, if you're talking about a major metropolitan city, well, most of those are going to be leaning a certain direction anyways, right? And so then that message has to be carried, probably by orders, right? So I mean, the reception I've seen from all my friends that are law enforcement are very, very positive. They like to see strength in the Second Amendment, especially in Texas. But to be fair, to be accurate, there was opposition from law enforcement at least the leadership levels.
Yeah, there was chiefs of police that came out, Art Acevedo and a few other folks were the big. Well, he was Houston at the time. I think he's in Miami now, or I think he moved on to Miami. But there was some vocal opposition from police chiefs saying it was a bad decision.
Yeah.
But has there been anything across the I've not heard of any problems in any of these constitutional carry states.
You have to remember,
ever.
Yeah, well, you have to remember, right? So in Texas, it's been legal to carry a gun in your vehicle for years. And it's an extension of your home as part of the castle doctrine, right? So a lot of the interactions that Texas peace officers have with armed motorists, that's been happening for a long time under the Texas castle doctrine. So I don't think we're introducing something radically new. And if you look at it across the board, where states where this is already happening, there's not some kind of rise. There's certainly no rise in like negligent homicides. I can tell you this as a factoid, that since we've been collecting data on guns since like 1904, we have the lowest amount of negligent firearm deaths now than we've ever had. I'm not talking about per capita. I'm talking about period, ever lower.
Volume.
Yeah, just by numbers. There's less now, right? So you're not seeing these, a lot of the fear tactics that I hear to oppose this thing, you're just not seeing it if you look at data. So, it's one of those things. I mean,
well, and I think we just stress a couple of points here as we get near the end of it. First off, the information, I didn't know 75% of it. And like I said at the beginning, I actually had no clue what this was about, which is the beauty of it. And yes, I talked to my family and my wife and my son, and we're going to come out to RDI and spend some time and make sure we understand what we're doing. Bought my wife a really nice Glock Cerakote done by Sons of Liberty Gun Works.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful, right? And it sits at the house until she's ready. We have to get off the couch and go learn to use the handgun, because if you don't, you're going to put yourself in a position. So just a couple of things that I think I would recap. One is, I think it's very important what you said. Well, first off, at the beginning, information matters, right?
Absolutely.
If you think about it in the way Mike and Eric have kind of phrased how this whole thing is, and the introduction of this law, what we're seeing is a lot of crazy talk and misinformation, which leads, frankly, which is Tinder. If people start worrying, like, the guy sitting next to me, this person over here, or a traffic stop here, a traffic stop. All these things lead, the misinformation is bad, right? So I think what the most important things when I hear it, and I think our number one is, just because you can own a gun doesn't mean you're ready to use it, right?
No, absolutely.
Donna right here says, got my LTC recently, would not carry without taking a class. So the class doesn't hurt you, it helps you. Plus and I was looking through some of the laws, there's a lot of responsibilities that come with you owning a gun.
Sure.
Those didn't disappear just because you can carry it.
Drinking with the fire. There's a lot of things you should really know before you strap a gun to your hip.
You are in the liability level, your personal liability level is increasing when you carry a weapon. And of course, if you're not knowledgeable those things, I think it puts you in a bad position. So knowledge, just because you can carry doesn't. And the other thing is too, is I think the information matters. I think if you go to these classes at RDI, and I know Mike, you're a top-notch gun manufacturer, right, man? I'm sure the people you're talking to, you're dealing with, they're in another level, right?
This year the rules have gone out the window, right? As far as who your gun owners are. And the demographics of who a gun owner is currently is radically different than it was. We've seen people with that have never had an interest in buying a firearm before, now wanting the most effective defensive gun available to them. Going from having never owned a gun all the way to what is the most effective tool I can legally own. And you're seeing that across the board, right? So I know Eric will agree with this. People don't rise to the occasion. You typically fall to your lowest level of train, right? So a lot of people get these things, they have this fantasy that when the time comes, all of a sudden they're going to develop these talents they've never possessed before, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
and unfortunately, that's just not how it works. And
you mean watching Lone Survivor doesn't?
Yeah, or John Wick, right?
Watching John, you mean the minute I purchase this thing from Academy, I'm not going to be John Wick?
I'll tell you what's interesting about what you said as a gun manufacturer. I can tell you that this year, not only were guns completely sold out, so were lights and optics and armor and belts and everything that you would need to deploy that gun. So I think people are looking at the defensive side of this thing very seriously. So now put some knowledge behind that equipment.
Well, and they're also worried about what's coming out of the federal government too, right?
It's a little. Yes, a little
I mean, the times changed on January 20th, and we know where Joe Biden's going with his potential drawback on Second Amendment rights, or what he's at least going to attempt to do, right? And these things pop up after, ungodly, obviously, school shootings or something that goes on, mass shootings or whatever. For the president, a group of people always come out and rail on gun ownership, and they try to, use a situation at a particular time to make an effect or a change on a law. So we know that always comes and happens. But this piece we're seeing across the country right now with the new administration, it's affected this, but not in the way they thought. I mean, 20 million new gun owners was not what they were thinking when they're rolling out saying we're going to restrict gun ownership or eliminate automatic weapons.
Yeah, not just that, but I mean, I have friends of mine that are politically left-leaning people that I met through like debate panels on guns have now come, because while they weren't a proponent of gun ownership before, they also don't want their cafe burned to the ground. Whenever they're watching, or their store, or like their home, so when they're watching a lot of this civil unrest, which I think really drove the needle more than anything, was people lost confidence in the government to protect them, because there was in a lot of places severe in that. Luckily, San Antonio actually was pretty good.
Compared to the rest of the country, is minor.
I thought so, yeah, it really was. I mean, and we do have one of the best police departments in the country by far. And it's known throughout the country, that's a great thing. But I mean, the civil unrest is what I think drove a lot of people to, realize that they're responsible for their own defense. And your defense, your family, your home, your business, that's what I think moved the needle the most, to be honest. Now, yeah, politically, yeah, we're starting to see that now, but it started a couple of years ago in the civil unrest. I think you put it, which is a really good way to kind of wrap up today. I think you put it the right way, right? People have lost trust in the government to do their job. And at the top of one of those list of jobs that the government has, whether you're local, your county, your state, or your federal, is public safety, right? That's like job one, man. Sure. You don't live in a safe neighborhood, or you don't, you don't feel like you can walk out of your house and have a life, or your own piece of the world, your own little piece of the country is not protected. You're gonna do what you need to do to protect it yourself. I think it's funny, it's just true. It's like 20 million gun owners. There are liberals in that group, they're progressives. They're not talking about it, but they're buying, and they're recognizing that these things have gotten so out of control. And we sit here and debate all day long the politics of why people are pissed off and where you fall on the political spectrum. Yeah. But at the end of the day, people don't, your political party affiliation goes out the door when someone's trying to get the hell in your house, and you've got a few seconds to make a decision, which goes back to the training, which means, and I think you mentioned that too, and it's kind of piggybacks off of what Eric was talking about. Just because you have the gun doesn't mean you know what to do. And the chances of you probably in a fatal encounter that may be your fatality, and your lack of knowledge in the weapon you're carrying, someone comes into your house or tries to make something happen, or is trying to rob your home, your car, your vehicle, any extension of your personal property, and you're carrying a weapon and you don't have any idea what you're doing, you're just as likely to hurt yourself or a family member. I mean, God forbid, I've seen as many stories of kids shooting themselves because the parent didn't know what they were doing with the weapon. It wasn't properly secured. There wasn't knowledge for the kids. The kids didn't know to stay the hell away from it. They didn't know to properly respect it. I mean, it's a whole family thing, and I think that's what I want to end on. If you want to wrap us up, I think and we know Texas has come to this point, but Texas and carrying a weapon was 99% of the way there. This constitutional carry thing, if we can walk away from it, there's no scare factor to it. We shouldn't be fearful of people and their rights and their laws or the Second Amendment by any means. We should not be fearful of any of it. We should recognize it and be thankful that we live in the great state of Texas and we have these rules. We have to follow them. But I think if you could just kind of wrap up with your thoughts on responsible gun ownership and what it means to make sure you get the training right. But it's not just for you, it's your kids too, right? And it's your family.
Sure.
And it's what you're trying to protect.
Absolutely. Right? And we've heard people, in various places say, well, you're just trying to scare people into thinking they're going to get sued if they use their gun. We're not trying to scare anybody at any level. I don't want people to be fearful when it comes to owning or carrying a gun. I want them to be knowledgeable. And there are some litigation factors to consider if you're not trained and you don't know how to shoot, because you are responsible for where every one of those bullets goes. That having been said, our main goal is just to put good people that can legally carry in a mindset and in a training mode where they have the ability to use the weapon that they've chose to carry. We see it every time we have a class. There's somebody out there and they're shooting under very benign circumstances. Nobody's shooting back at them. They know nobody's here to hurt them. And they look at their performance and they're very unsatisfied with it because it's the first time they've ever pulled the trigger, which is absolutely fine. It's what's expected. But that's usually their moment of realization, like, holy cow, nothing bad is happening here, and look at what I'm doing. Like, now add the adrenaline dump and the fear and the chaos of a traumatic situation, and it goes south really quick. So most people, once they start pulling that trigger in some training environment, see why training is so valuable. And we encourage people, even after constitutional carry goes into effect, to still continue to look for, whether it's at RDI or anywhere else, there's other good trainers out there that can give you the baseline for what you need to know if you choose to carry that weapon.
Yeah, because that adrenaline would really it puts you in such a crazy position. I was at the house, and I'll wrap up with this, and SWAT rolled up next door, and the chopper was overhead the house. The Eagle was circling the house, and I knew the guy in the chopper, Todd, was circling the house, and he's like reaching out. He goes, I know that's your house, man. He knew it was my house, but they were coming rope, they're repeat offenders. They came to pick up a friend at the house next door, right? Guy that was accused of murdering somebody just down the street over some drugs, young guy. And I'm watching, so my wife hears it, and she wants to go outside. I'm like, you can't go outside. What are you crazy? You're staying in the house, because you don't know what's gonna happen. But I'm watching through the window, and everybody's, kitted up, everybody's ready to go, right? And there's 20 police officers, everything's off the charts, and I'm not even involved in the transaction. The legal transaction's occurring, and my heart is beating out of my chest. Like, it's like good Lord, man. Like, there's 20 little red dots on this kid's body, and if he makes one wrong move or decision, and I'm thinking to myself, man, if somebody came to my house or the shit hit the fan and I've got a few seconds to react, you better be ready. And at least have some semblance of training, because the adrenaline, the action, the fear, because it's fearful too. There's fear involved. There's nothing wrong with saying you're afraid. At least that'll give you an edge to be prepared, right? All that's happening, right? And you have to make a split-second decision. Is that a burglar coming in my house? What is he armed, or he or she armed? Is that my kid that's roaming around downstairs in the dark? Right. And I think it's somebody else. I think a little bit of training matters. So get some information, I guess, is what I would say. Make it happen, but probably not buy what you are comfortable with and what fits your skill level too. Mike's got people showing up buying God knows what blasters, and they've never carried anything in their life. So, hey, look, I appreciate it. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for
Eric
having
from
me.
RDI, Reality Defense Incorporated. Find them from a training perspective. Reach out to them for your family. You can show up. You can bring everybody out. I think they do groups. They set up different they can come out to your business. They can show up at your business, your operation, and teach and train multiple people so that they understand what's about to happen and the rules that are associated with gun ownership, and they can create a positive gun ownership society in San Antonio. That's what we want. That's what Texas is. Mike, Sons of Liberty Gunworks, continues to be a buddy. We always joke about our Facebook programs and posts getting throttled back, and the man, if it's Zuckerberg that's after us, I'm almost positive. So Mike and I appreciate you, man. You're always there, and Sons of Liberty has become the premier gun manufacturer in the nation, man. We're proud of you, and everything's going great for you, and we're very thankful for what you're up to, too, and always.
Hey, man, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
it's good to be back on the broadcast.
Yeah, hey, look, we're going to get it rolling back up again. We're going to start doing more. It has to happen. Sometimes, you go in an election, and it doesn't go your way, and you really get depressed, and you lick your wounds for a while. Well, I'm tired of licking my wounds. It's time to get back in the game and make sure we understand what's happening in our city. We bring issues to light. We talk about disagreement. There's nothing wrong with that. But more importantly, we get educated on what the facts are and what's happening in the city. It's easy to run around and complain and point the finger and then have no clue how anything works. So, that position is not something I'm ever going to do when I come on this podcast. I'm going to try to talk about everything. If I don't know it, I'll bring an expert on, and then we'll have the conversation. And if we agree to disagree, so be it. That's the beauty of San Antonio. I continue to believe that this is the greatest city in the nation. I have no fault in whatsoever in an election or anything like that. All those things are in the past. What matters going forward in the future is the ideas and things we think we can do better as a city. We can get a little bit better at your house, your street, your neighborhood, in the county, in the state. We just get out and vote. We choose people. that are going to help us to make this the greatest place in the state. San Antonio, we're here. We're going to keep coming back. The broadcast will be knocking on doors and doing all we can to bring a message that we're going to get educated, we're going to learn. We're going to hold City Hall accountable, so we will be here as often as we can. Next up episode, we'll let you know what's to come. We'll put a graphic up, but until then, we appreciate you. Thank you to Align Mortgage, RDI, Sons of Liberty Gun Works, the broadcast. Having been gone for a month, though, we're coming back, but we are officially finished for tonight. We are out. Thank you.